Good day, students of economics. The purpose of this video is to examine the economics of international trade with a strong concentration on the economic rationale behind trade, comparative advantage. Let's launch our investigation into the economics of international trade by explaining some relevant concepts. Adam Smith, 1776. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. Adam Smith introduced the concept of absolute advantage as the rationale for trade. A nation can produce more than a potential trading partner. That country possesses the absolute advantage in producing that product. According to Adam Smith, if a country controls or possesses the absolute advantage, there's no need to consider trade. However, along comes David Ricardo in 1817 and introduces a new concept to the economic world, comparative advantage. This term is not in red by mistake. It is the most important idea in regards to international trade. Comparative advantage is the rationale used by economists to justify or advocate for international trade. David Ricardo proved that it makes sense for a country to trade with another nation if it possesses a lower domestic opportunity cost in producing a product than its potential trading partner. The amazing aspect to David Ricardo's mathematical contribution to economic thinking is that he proved beyond any doubt that even if a country possesses the absolute advantage in producing products, it's still possible for a country to gain a comparative advantage or have a comparative advantage by being able to produce a product at a lower domestic opportunity cost. After determining which country or which nation possesses a comparative advantage by calculating domestic opportunity costs, we economists understand that nations should specialize. So a country should take their limited or scarce resources and concentrate their economic efforts in producing a product or providing a service in which they possess the comparative advantage. So after calculating and understanding comparative advantage, the second term, this facilitates our execution of the third term. Countries should take their land, their capital, and labor and concentrate their economic efforts into producing a product in which they possess the comparative advantage. After determining which nation will produce which product, the next aspect of trade is how much of good A will be received for good B. We call this the terms of trade, the rate at which one good will be exchanged for another good. Right? Now, the important caveat to terms of trade is that the terms of trade must lie between the respective domestic opportunity costs of the two countries. Finally, the kit and caboodle. When it's all said and done, why are economists huge proponents of trade? The idea is straightforward. Limited resources, unlimited economic ones. By taking scarce resources and concentrating economic efforts into producing products in which a country or a nation possesses a comparative advantage, we escape the limitations of the domestic production possibility frontier, and therefore a country can enjoy increased output. The entire globe increases the production of goods and services through specialization, which reduces the burden of scarcity. The entire reason we study economics is scarce resources, unlimited wants. So through specialization and trade, we have these gains that reduce the burden of scarcity, which leads to increased living standards for human beings in all countries. These concepts will become more clear as we go through an example. The best approach to teaching the concepts associated with international economics is through an example. So absolute advantage, comparative advantage, specialization, terms of trade, and gains from trade. And that's the purpose of our exercise here. We'll take two countries under consideration, Mexico and Germany, and we're also going to consider two products, potential production of wheat and potential production of lumber, and we'll assume that this is potential output for the month. So this information for both of the countries' potential production is represented numerically in the data up top and graphically down bottom on the production possibility frontiers. An important observation immediately. Notice the shape of the production possibility frontiers. Both for Germany, the blue production possibility frontier, and for Mexico, the orange production possibility frontier, both are linear. What is the economic rationale for a linear production possibility frontier? What economic observation should be immediately evident? Constant cost along the curve. Going to assume, for simplicity, because this is an introductory course, that the economic resources to produce these two types of output, wheat and lumber, are readily adaptable or shiftable between these two types of production. Therefore, every time the country wants an additional unit of one type of output, the foregone output of the other product will remain the same. Constant cost along the curve. So this is unlike the example previously in the semester with capital goods and consumer goods, where we had a bowed or concave, a curved production possibility frontier, increasing opportunity cost. Keep it simple here, introductory class, constant cost along the curve. By looking at the curve below, remember, the blue production possibility frontier represents Germany's potential output for the month. The orange represents Mexico. On the vertical axis, measuring potential production of lumber. On the horizontal axis, potential production of wheat. Two observations can be made just by looking at the graph. Absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Which nation can produce more lumber? Well, obviously, Germany can produce 30 units per month. Now, this could be in millions, right? We'll just keep the numbers simple, right? Germany can produce 30 per month, and Mexico can only produce 15. In absolute terms, right, in Adam Smith's world, Germany can produce more lumber per month. Germany has the absolute advantage in that product. Wheat production. Germany can produce 20 units. This could be in millions of bushels, right? Germany can produce 20 per month, and Mexico can only produce 5. So again, Germany has the absolute advantage. You see this with the graphically, right? So according to Adam Smith, no reason to trade. Even before we introduced how to calculate this mathematically, we can also observe comparative costs and comparative advantage by looking at the graph. Ask yourself a simple question. Where is Germany dominant? Where are they absolutely crushing Mexico in terms of potential production per month? And where is Mexico not so far behind? All right? So this is terrible English, but good economics. Where is Germany more better? And where is Mexico less worse? All right? It should be readily evident that Germany is crushing it when it comes to wheat production. 20 versus 5. So Germany can produce 4 times the level of wheat production that Mexico can, right? And Mexico, they're still behind in lumber, but they're not as far behind in lumber as they are in wheat. So in terms of comparative advantage, we can already determine that Germany is going to have a comparative advantage in wheat, and Mexico is going to have a comparative advantage in lumber. This was David Ricardo's important economic contribution to international trade and the rationale for specialization in trade. That even though Germany had the absolute advantage of producing both products, it still makes sense for both countries to concentrate their limited or scarce resources into producing the product in which they have a comparative advantage and trade for the other products. On the next slide, we'll prove mathematically what we observed through the graph. For Mexico, what is the opportunity cost of a bushel of wheat? How much lumber does Mexico have to give up every time they want another bushel of wheat? Likewise, if Mexico wants more lumber, how much wheat do they have to give up? What's the opportunity cost for a unit of lumber? If there was no possibility for trade, the only way Mexico could get additional units of wheat is to give up lumber, and the only way they could get more lumber is to give up wheat, right? Choices, trade-offs, and costs. Same exercise for Germany. In Germany, what is the domestic opportunity cost for the next unit of wheat, the next bushel of wheat? And what's the opportunity cost for an additional unit of lumber? Now, the answers are already on the slide. Unfortunately, the answers will not be on the test. But let's explain how we got these answers, right? It tells you here, for Germany, 1 wheat cost or equals 1.5 lumbers. Right? Every time that Germany wants an additional unit of wheat, they have to give up 1.5 lumber. And for Germany, the opportunity cost of lumber is 2/3 of a bushel of wheat, right? How do we get those numbers? All right, let's look at Germany's production possibility frontier. Start at point A as an apple, moving to point B as in boy. All right, at point A, Germany has no wheat production. All resources have been allocated to lumber production, so all land, capital, and labor to lumber production, right? And they say, well, we don't want all lumber, we want some wheat, so they shift some resources away from wheat into lumber, right? They produce 2 units of wheat, but they had to give up 3 units of lumber. To calculate opportunity cost, whatever you're getting, put that on your denominator. Whatever you're giving up, put that on your numerator. So in this case, Germany gets 2 bushels of wheat by giving up 3 units of lumber. 3 over 2 is 1.5 or 1.5. So the opportunity cost of 1 bushel of wheat in Germany is 1.5 lumber, right? Now, here's the thing. Because there's constant cost along the curve, to easily calculate the opportunity cost of the other product, all you have to do is invert the fraction, right? Instead of it being 3 over 2, it's 2 over 3, right? 2 over 3. Now, we could see that on the data as well. We could observe that from the data as well. All right, start at point K as in Kelvin, right? Move to point J as in jelly, right? We say, okay, at that point, all resources have been allocated to wheat. There's no lumber, but we want some lumber. As we move from K back to J, right, we get 3 lumber. We give up 2 bushels of wheat. So again, proving it mathematically, right? The opportunity cost of lumber, to get 1 lumber, costs 2/3 of wheat, right? Whatever you're getting it, you put that on your denominator. In this case, we got 3 lumber. Whatever we're giving up, we put that on our numerator. We gave up 2 wheat. 1 lumber cost or equals 2/3 of a wheat. So the opportunity cost of lumber is 2/3 of a wheat. Doing the exact same exercise for Mexico, we can quickly calculate the opportunity cost for wheat and lumber in Mexico. Moving from point A to B, right? Mexico gets 1 unit of wheat. They give up 3 lumber. So the opportunity cost of wheat in Mexico is 3 lumber. Right, inverting the fraction or moving from F back to E, the opportunity cost of 1 lumber is 1/3 of a wheat. Now here's the important economic observation in regards to international trade. Remember, lower is better. If a country can produce a product at a lower domestic opportunity cost than its potential trading partner, it possesses the comparative advantage. So in this case, Germany can produce wheat at a lower domestic opportunity cost than Mexico. 1 wheat costs 1.5 lumber in Germany. 1 wheat costs 3 lumber in Mexico. Germany has the comparative advantage in wheat. Now, David Ricardo's genius. By default, that means Mexico has to have the comparative advantage in producing the other products. And lo and behold, the math follows, right? For Mexico, the opportunity cost of 1 lumber is 1/3 of a wheat. For Germany, the opportunity cost of lumber is 2/3 of a wheat. Right? Mexico can produce lumber at a lower domestic opportunity cost than Germany. Now we've determined which countries should produce which product based on comparative advantage. Knowing that Germany has a comparative advantage in wheat and Mexico has a comparative advantage in lumber, right? Germany can produce wheat at a lower domestic opportunity cost than Mexico. Mexico can produce lumber at a lower domestic opportunity cost than Germany. Each country will take their limited or scarce resources and concentrate their economic efforts in producing the product in which they enjoy that comparative advantage. So Germany will just make wheat. How many will they make? They'll make 20. How do we know that? Look at point K. That's the most they can make. They will now depend on Mexico for lumber. All right, Mexico will take their capital, land, and labor and concentrate their economic efforts. They will specialize in just making lumber. They'll trade for wheat. So they'll produce at point A as an apple in their production possibility frontier. All right, so assuming that both countries have agreed to specialize based on comparative advantage, we know what will be total production of each product. The next piece of the international trade puzzle is determining rate of exchange, the rate at which one product will be exchanged for another product. In our example, Germany has the comparative advantage in wheat and will trade for lumber. Mexico has the comparative advantage in lumber and trade for wheat. So how much lumber will Germany expect per unit of wheat, and how much wheat will Mexico expect in exchange for lumber? Most important idea related to terms of trade must lie between the respective domestic opportunity costs of the two products under consideration. A nation will not make itself worse off through trade. Let's use wheat as an example. So Germany is producing wheat and will trade for lumber. The opportunity cost of wheat in Germany is 1.5 lumber. Germany is going to need or want at least 1.5 lumber in return for the wheat they send to Mexico. When Mexico produced wheat domestically, the opportunity cost of wheat was 3 lumber. Mexico would never make itself worse off and therefore would need the rate of exchange to be something less than 3 lumber. So in terms of the potential or possible terms of trade for wheat, it must lie between 1.5 lumber and 3 lumber. So any number between 1.5 and 3 will work. 2 is a nice round number, right? So 1 wheat for 2 lumber, that's mutually agreeable in economic terms for both nations. It lies between the respective domestic opportunity cost of both countries. Now, the interesting aspect of terms of trade is there's no perfect answer here. 1.6 would work, 1.7 would work, 2.9 would work, 2.8 would work. So any number in between the respective domestic opportunity cost is a potential agreeable level of the terms of trade, the rate at which wheat would be exchanged for lumber or vice versa, lumber for wheat. Economists are proponents of international trade based on the assumption that through specialization, a nation taking their limited or scarce resources, their land, capital, and labor, and producing a product in which they enjoy a comparative advantage, there will be an increase in global output, living standards will increase, and we will address the very heart and soul of economics. There'll be a lessening of the burden of scarcity. Let's prove this mathematically through our example. Now remember, this is a simple example of 2 products, but the idea can be extrapolated to a much larger extent. We need to identify the red point on each nation's production possibility frontier to calculate gains from trade. So prior to trade, Mexico was allocatively efficient at E as in everyone, and Germany was allocatively efficient at H as in happy. Remember, allocative efficiency is a normative decision. These points on the curves would have to be given It's impossible to just look at the data or at the production possibility frontier and determine where a country has decided the mix of output makes them the happiest. What combination of wheat and lumber maximizes their utility, where the marginal benefits of consuming the next unit equal the marginal cost of how the resources could have been allocated otherwise. So this has to be given. It's been given in this problem. Mexico was allocatively efficient at E as in everyone. Germany was allocatively efficient at H as in happy. That helps us determine the gains from trade. So what we've done down bottom is we've constructed some data. So prior to trade, right, Germany was producing 14 wheat and 9 lumber at point H, right, on their production possibility frontier where they were allocatively efficient. Prior to trade, Mexico was producing 4 wheat, right, and 3 lumber at point E on their curve, allocatively efficient. So we add those totals together to get how much global output occurred before trade. So 14 wheat produced by Germany, 4 wheat produced by Mexico. Total wheat production before trade was 18. 9 lumber produced by Germany, 3 lumber produced by Mexico before trade. 12 total before trade. But what's global production after trade? So remember, Mexico will take their limited or scarce resources, concentrate their economic efforts into producing lumber because they can produce lumber at a lower domestic opportunity cost. They will produce 15. How do we know that? They're no longer producing wheat. They're going to take all their land, capital, and labor, concentrate their economic efforts into producing lumber, point A on their curve. So global production of lumber is now 15, right? 15 is 3 greater than 12. Lumber production went up by 3, right? Same thing with the wheat production. Right, Germany's just going to make wheat. They're going to trade for lumber. We look at point K on Germany's production possibility frontier. 20 output relative to the 18 produced by both countries prior to trade. Wheat production went up by 2. So that final column, GFT, refers to gains from trade. Right? So both countries are made better off. In economic terms, both countries escaped the limitations of their domestic production possibility frontier and now would consume at a point beyond their domestic limitations. A point that lies outside a nation's production possibilities frontier is typically characterized as desirable but unattainable. Unattainable because of fixed technology and fixed access to the quantity and quality of resources. However, through specialization in trade, both Mexico and Germany now consume at the points beyond their production possibility frontier. So through specialization in trade, each country has consumed more output, lessened the burden of scarcity, and improved limit standards. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video of economic learning.